Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. What is a comprehensive look at the schedule of fights that we've got from now until early August. What is a solid schedule? The big fights, the smaller ones, it's fantastic. That if you're a boxing fan, you have a lot to look forward to.
Look at that schedule.
I want to rate these fights on a 5-star system. 5 stars being the very best fight that you can hope to make, and
1 star being the worst.
the 5-star system, that 5 stars for a given fight accents that really is the very best fight you can hope to make at a given weight. 4 stars, not necessarily the best fight that you can hope to make, but still a great fight. 3 stars,
3 being a solid fight.
define solid,
Solid meaning it'll be competitive.
and yield a pleasing aesthetic. 3 stars makes for a solid fight. 2, that's a foregone conclusion. That's a fight where, before the opening bell sounds, you know what's going to happen and you know what the outcome is going to be. It's important to note that there are lots of different foregone conclusion fights. For example, an unbeaten up-and-comer who's still fighting in developmental fights, or maybe a fighter who's been out a while that needs a tune-up fight, a maintenance fight.
There's that.
Or say, a fighter who competes at a very high level. So high, he goes into most situations as the overwhelming favorite. There are many different types of foregone conclusion fights, and while not all of them are bad, all of them are predictable.
Hence the name. Foregone conclusion.
2 stars is a foregone conclusion fight. 1 star, that's a shit show. That's a fight where you're scratching your head and wondering, why did they even make it? A glaring example of that is, say, Fury versus Chisora 3.
Why?
Why did they even bother to make that? Or why did they put David Lemieux in the ring with David Benavidez? We all knew what was going to happen. There were better fights to make for David Benavidez than that.
You getting the idea of what a shit show is.
So looking at this comprehensive schedule of fights that kicks off this weekend with the Canelo Alvarez versus Jaime Munguia fight, I myself would rate that fight as a 4-star fight. 4 stars, not 5, not 5. It's not the best fight that you can hope to make, but it's still a great fight.
Why?
With so many people saying that they're starting to see slippage from Canelo Alvarez, that he's on the back 9 and he's in decline, this fight gives us the opportunity to really find that out, because here you have a guy who's not going to hang back, he's not going to move around and stay behind his jab, he's going to step into it, he's going to go for the knockout. Jaime Munguia is no finesse fighter.
He's a volume puncher, a combination puncher. He goes for the knockout.
What is Canelo Alvarez's chance to prove that he's still got it? I think the aesthetic of this match, the look of it, it will be entertaining. So I rate that fight 4 stars. And that's this weekend on the 4th. Later on next week on the 6th, current reigning undisputed super bantamweight champion Naoya Inoue will be taking on Mexico's own upset-minded Luis Nery, who's been saying this and that about how he's going to do to Naoya Inoue what Buster Douglas did to Mike Tyson.
3 stars.
You don't think that's a foregone conclusion fight? The odds makers have Naoya Inoue the overwhelming favorite.
Like they had Devin Haney the overwhelming favorite over Ryan Garcia?
I view this as a solid fight. And even though I am going with Naoya Inoue to knock out Luis Nery, Luis is a solid enough fighter, a 2-division champion who's only ever lost 1 fight.
He can punch.
He's pulled a big upset before. I view this as a good enough fight, and Luis Nery as a solid enough competitor that this is a solid fight to me, even if I think Inouye's gonna knock him out. 3 stars.
2 stars for Vasyl Lomachenko versus George Kambosos.
I don't think it's a bad fight, you understand, but I do think it's a foregone conclusion. I think most people, if you ask them, who's gonna win the Loma versus Kambosos fight, most people will tell you it's Vasyl Lomachenko.
I'll tell you I think it's Vasyl Lomachenko.
Or if I'm not complaining, it's because the overall show looks to be a good show, the undercard fights, and don't forget, Vasyl Lomachenko the night of will have been out for a little over a year's time. He's going to be fighting George in George's neck of the woods, in Australia.
So I think the outcome of the match, while a foregone conclusion, still yields entertainment value. 2 stars.
That's on May 11th. On May 18th, Tyson Fury versus Alexander Usyk. What is a 5-star fight. What really is the best fight you can hope to make at that weight. It speaks for itself. two unbeaten fighters, two unbeaten champions, putting it all on the line for all the marbles.
5 stars.
3 stars for the Josh Taylor versus Jack Catterall fight. 3 stars because
It's not a foregone conclusion that either guy wins.
it's not a foregone conclusion that Jack Catterall wins because he did enough to win in their first meeting and he got robbed. And it's certainly not a foregone conclusion that Josh Taylor wins because Josh has been looking like shit in his last 2 fights.
coming off a loss.
3-star fight. It's a solid fight where the outcome isn't a foregone conclusion.
3 stars.
5 stars for Artur Beterbiev versus Dmitry Bivol, set to go down June 1st.
A true 50-50 fight where there's no wrong answer until the opening bell sounds. You could go with Dmitry, you could go with Artur.
They're both unbeaten fighters who have reigned as champions at light heavyweight for a number of years at the peak of their powers.
It's a 5-star fight. It's the best fight you could hope to make at this weight.
3 stars for the June 15th contest, the rematch between Chris Billum-Smith, WBO champion, and Richard Riakporhe, the challenger. While Richard Riakporhe beat Chris Billum-Smith some years ago, some years later, Chris has shown improvement. He is a reigning champion who already pulled one upset against Lawrence Okoli. Could he pull another against Richard Riakporhe?
It's a solid fight. Solid. 3 stars.
3 stars for the Gervonta Davis versus Frank Martin fight. You might be surprised to hear me say that a Davis fight is a solid fight, a 3-star fight.
This one is.
I've seen Frank Martin fight by fight. I've seen him look good, and I've seen him look bad.
Seen both.
What makes it a solid fight is that this isn't some little guy that Gervonta Davis brought up from 130 up to 135.
To my knowledge, there are no weight stipulations, and if there are,
Well, then that would lower it from a 3-star fight to a 2-star fight. But to my knowledge, there are no weight stipulations in association with this match. Frank Martin, he is unbeaten and he can punch, has some size for this weight.
3-star fight.
3 stars!
Stars!
For David Benavidez's ascent to the light heavyweight division to face former champion Oleksandr Vozdik, who's a big guy, bigger guy than most of the guys that David usually fights. Boxes better than most of the guys David usually fights.
Punches harder.
The outcome is not a foregone conclusion. These are uncharted waters for what is supposed to be the Mexican monster. 3 stars.
3 stars for Matias versus Pato.
It's not a foregone conclusion that Subriel Matias beats this guy, even if you think he's going to. It's not a foregone conclusion that he does. Liam Pato has been doing very well for himself. He knocked out unbeaten Jock Barvis. More recently, he knocked out Montana Love. Does he have what it takes to knock out Subriel Matias?
We'll see.
Or will Subriel Matias do to him what he did to Jeremias Ponce, what he just did to Shohan Ergashev? It's a solid fight.
Not necessarily a great fight, and certainly not the best fight you could hope to make at this weight, but it's solid. 3 stars.
3 more for Juan Francisco Estrada versus Jesse Bam Rodriguez. What is Jesse's return to the super flyweight division for what in many ways is that division's ruler? Gallo Estrada, far more experienced, far more seasoned, but also more weathered than young Jesse.
It's a 3-star fight. It's a solid fight.
Even if you have Bam Rodriguez winning, and I do, I still think Gallo has enough left that he can make it interesting. Now, after the Gallo Estrada versus Bam Rodriguez fight in late June, in July, we're going to get an even better fight than that. Yes, better than that, between reigning champions Kazuto Ioka versus Fernando Martinez for what are the WBA and IBF titles. IBF Super Flyweight champion Fernando Martinez will meet WBA champion Kazuto Ioka on July 7th in Tokyo. A press conference was held to announce the fight at the Ryogoku Kogukan, and
Did you say that right?
it's an attractive meeting of super flyweight champions with the 35-year-old 4-division champion Kazuto Ioka set for the 2nd defense of his WBA title, and Martinez making the 3rd defense of his. The Argentine turned pro in 2017 and is 16-0 with 9 KOs and coming off of an 11th round stoppage of Jade Bornea last June in Minneapolis. Ioka, who turned over in 2009, has claimed titles at strawweight, junior flyweight, and super flyweight.
You think this is a better fight than Rodriguez versus Estrada? Why?
Well, for starters, it's a unification match. there are 2 alphabet titles on the line, not just one like what you see in Estrada versus Rodriguez. The aesthetic of the match makes for an entertaining fight. Fernando Martinez is best described as a come-forward, aggressive, volume puncher, whereas Kazuto is a calculative, cunning counterpuncher. Very experienced, more experienced than Fernando Martinez, though Fernando is some years younger, which makes the bout intriguing.
More intriguing than Estrada versus Rodriguez.
Yes, I'd say so. I'm settled on Bam Rodriguez beating Gallo Estrada. I rate that as a 3-star fight. I think Gallo can make it competitive, he can make it interesting, and the outcome isn't necessarily a foregone conclusion, but I'm settled on that pick, whereas this is a bit harder to edge.
And there's more on the line.
Part of the intrigue is that the night of the fight, Fernando Martinez will not have fought in over a year's time, so there may be ring rust, though at the same time, he is 2 or 3 years younger than Kazuto Ioka, and you have to wonder if Father Time won't catch up to Kazuto the night of.
Has a bad habit of doing that.
I might favor Kazuto Ioka to win because he's seen guys like Fernando Martinez before. He saw a guy like him in Kosei Tanaka way back there in 2020. In more recent years, he saw a guy like him in Joshua Franco, who he fought 2 times and finally figured out the second time.
He's seen this style before.
But Kazuto Ioka has seen more guys like Fernando than Fernando has seen guys like Kazuto. Kazuto is more experienced in every way that you can imagine, but is he perhaps too experienced in his mid-30s?
Can he still handle a guy like this? There's only one way to find out. You have to see it.
It's a 4-star fight in my opinion, with many of the same elements as the Gallo Estrada versus Bam Rodriguez fight, with more alphabet titles. It is a unification match between champions at the same weight, and one of them is unbeaten.
For me, it's a slightly more intriguing fight than Gallo versus Bam. I say slight. It's not by much.
Fernando Martinez has been boxing on the PBC and Showtime side of things up until this point, but I'd wager they don't have much use for a super flyweight over there at the PBC right now.
Showtime is out of boxing and the PBC's in bed with Amazon. Amazon hasn't given them that many fight dates, and they haven't announced all that many shows.
Comprehensive list of cards we just talked about. The PBC only has 2 shows on the calendar. Just 2 compared to everybody else. Thus, you can see why it is that Fernando Martinez will have to travel to Japan, to Tokyo, to assert himself as the best in show at super flyweight.
The PBC weren't going to pay to bring Kazuto to America.
So Fernando had to pack his bags. 4-star fight. That takes care of at least one fight in July. The following month, in early August, we're going to see Terence Crawford make his ascent to what is a 4th weight class, a 4th division, to take on newly crowned, unbeaten champion Israel Madrimov, in what I think is a 3-star fight. 3 stars. It's a solid fight. The outcome is not a foregone conclusion.
Remember,
What?
the night of the fight, Terence Crawford will not have fought in a little over a year's time, and he will be moving up to a new weight to take on a naturally bigger, unbeaten fighter who punches hard and comes from a great amateur background.
What balances things out is that this fighter, this newly crowned champion, is a lot less experienced in the pros than Terence Crawford. So even though Terence is a bit smaller, and certainly older than Israel Madrimov, he's a lot more experienced at a higher level than Israel Madrimov, making it a solid fight and what could be a competitive fight. You want my honest opinion? I think Israel might put up a much better fight than Errol Spence Jr. did last summer.
That fight was a foregone conclusion to me, and I said it many, many times here on this channel in the build-up.
Don't confuse the stage for the match, the profile of it, and how many people are aware of a fight to the fight's quality, the fight's caliber. To me, Crawford versus Spence as a fight was a 2-star fight. Foregone conclusion fight, even though it was for undisputed. I was quite confident of what Crawford would do, and he did it. Whereas this fight, there's more of an air of intrigue for me in this fight.
It's his 4th weight class.
I remember years ago when Roman Gonzalez moved up to his 4th division, his 4th weight class, which was super flyweight, and he started to look human there. You started to see wrinkles. That's where he got knocked out by Sorung Visai.
His fourth weight class.
I remember when 3-division champion Jorge Linares got it in his head that he should move up in weight and fight at a fourth weight class at super lightweight. And up there, he got trounced. He got annihilated in just one round by a journeyman.
His fourth weight class.
So when I think about that, and I see this, that Terence will be attempting to become a champion at a fourth weight against a very strong, well-schooled boxer that has a great amateur background, albeit not that many pro fights. It reminds me of the level of danger that, yes, Terence Crawford is a pound-for-pound fighter, one of the best in the sport, top 5, top 3, top 2 in the world. There is an element of danger for a fighter who's been out a while, in his mid-30s, moving up to a fourth weight. The outcome is not a foregone conclusion. Even if you're quite confident that Crawford wins, and in many ways I am, there's no guarantee that he does.
You gotta fight the fight.
See him to find out, because the odds makers and I myself was quite confident that Devin Haney would beat Ryan Garcia. Even after it was announced that Ryan had blew the weight by 3 pounds, I still stuck to my original pick and went with Devin. But look at what happened.
Got his fucking ass kicked. Nobody really imagined that Devin was gonna get his ass kicked like that. Now, maybe a couple of ballsy gamblers hoped to make some money off a big upset, but nobody really thought.
You see what I mean? You can favor Terence Crawford to win the Israel Madrimov fight, but it's a solid enough fight, and there's enough there that it's not a foregone conclusion that he does. It's not a lock.
3-star fight.
It's a solid fight between a pound-for-pound elite fighter and a solid boxer, a solid champion, newly crowned, unbeaten. He doesn't yet know how to lose. Terence makes it through this. It may service as a segue to an even better fight, what I would rate a 4-star fight between Terence and the winner of Tim Tszyu versus Virgil Ortiz.
I would rate that as a 4-star fight.
Maybe even 5. We will cross that bridge when we get to it. Looking forward to it. And we will evaluate every single one of the fights on the August show,
Based on a 5-star system.
as well as all of the fights on the Matchroom versus Queensbury show.
Based on a 5-star system.
But you get the gist of it. Starting this weekend, all the way into August, if you're a boxing fan, a true blue boxing fan, you have a lot to watch and a lot to look forward to that will give us that much more to talk about.